Welcome back to Transcriber from Reddit. Today's topic comes from Substack. It's a Substack/website read from the user Open Source Defense. This was posted on October 23rd, 2023. The title reads OSD 244, short for Open Source Defense. Episode 244. You're so vague, you probably think this law is about you. Below that is an image of various semi-auto parts, an anime girl, and what looks like a keyboard in the background. I will read as follows. Larry Vickers pled guilty last week to a set of federal charges, linked here, related to the importation and transfer of various firearms. Below is a Twitter or X capture of user Rob Romano stating something similar. He says, Larry Vickers pleads guilty to federal charges for violating U.S. sanctions on Russia and conspiring with 2 police chiefs to fraudulently obtain machine guns. And then below that, he has linked the justice.gov article. I continue reading. This settles the mystery of why the ATF seized his collection, linked here, 2 years ago. It also highlights something interesting about the way federal law works. Title 18 USC Section 922 subsection O reads, Paragraph 1. Except as provided in Paragraph 2, it shall be unlawful for any person to transfer or possess a machine gun. Paragraph 2. This subsection does not apply with respect to Point A. A transfer to, or by, or possession by, or under the authority of the United States or any department or agency thereof, or a state, or a department, agency, or political subdivision thereof, or, point B, any lawful transfer or lawful possession of a machine gun that was lawfully possessed before the date this subsection takes effect. That ends that section. I continue reading. Since 1986, that section of law has prevented the purchase of new machine guns. Subsection 2A creates an exception to that for government agencies, including law enforcement, and that's what Vickers is charged with conspiring to violate. The way the exception works is that if you're an appropriately licensed FFL, short for Federal Firearms License, dealer, you can import or buy a machine gun if a law enforcement agency asks you to demo it for them. Vickers was himself an appropriately licensed FFL and had a buddy who was also such an FFL. Vickers also had some buddies who were chiefs of their local police departments. According to the plea agreement, from time to time, Vickers would text one of his chief of police buddies and say, in effect, quote, Hey, there's this cool machine gun out there. If you jump through the hoop of writing me a letter saying that you're at least theoretically interested in testing it out for your department, then I can order it and we can play with it, end quote. Which seems... perfectly legal? Sure, it's not the spirit of the law, but in court the letter of the law is what counts. Side note, that's probably what Vickers and his chief of police buddies were relying on. As is tradition, Congress left it up to an administrative agency to write the actual details that matter. The ATF did so in Title 27 CFR Section 479.105 subsection D. Read as follows. Subject to compliance with the provisions of this part, applications to transfer and register a machine gun manufactured or imported on or after May 19, 1986, to dealers qualified under this part will be approved if it is established by specific information the expected governmental customers who would require a demonstration of the weapon, information as to the availability of the machine gun to fill subsequent orders, and letters from governmental entities expressing a need for a particular model or interest in seeing a demonstration of a particular weapon. End read. So, if the police chief writes you a letter saying he's interested in demoing a particular machine gun, you can buy it. Sounds like Vickers is still in the clear. The law is so vague that the ATF has had to release open letters explaining what they really is in italics, meant when they wrote the regulation. Parentheses, which regulation was itself written by the ATF to explain what Congress really, in italics, meant when it wrote the law, end parentheses. The latest open letter, linked here, from January 2023, says, among other things, that the police demo letter has to be, quote, written on the government entity's letterhead, end quote, and, quote, dated within 1, parentheses, the number 1, end parentheses, year of the date of the receipt of the application, end quote. These are the formatting details that the ATF uses to discern your true intent. Another fun fact, the letter gets submitted to the ATF along with your application to transfer the machine gun. So Vickers got his demo letters over the years, submitted them to the ATF approved them, this is in italics, and then years later the ATF looked into it and decided that when the police chief said he was potentially interested in demoing the guns, he wasn't really, that's in italics, interested enough. That word is also in italics. How much interest is enough? How serious does the police chief have to be? How would you even measure his seriousness? Can he change his mind later? It doesn't say anywhere in the law, but the ATF is free to decide on the answer years after your purchase and then prosecute you accordingly. That raises the obvious question here. If this law is so indefensibly vague, then why did Vickers plead guilty? It turns out that the better question is, why wouldn't, that is in italics, he plead guilty? For prosecutors, the broadness and vagueness of federal law is a feature. It means that everybody is guilty of violating a bunch of laws, especially in a domain as heavily regulated as machine gun imports, and prosecutors can simply decide who to charge. In practice, the way this works is that prosecutors get a hook into someone, parentheses, for Vickers, it was perhaps the sanctions violations, end parentheses, and then go looking for additional charges. Those will be easy to find, and then prosecutors come to the defendant and say, quote, we have 20 charges against you. Each one is punishable by 5 years in prison. You can go to trial and risk a 100-year prison term. Or you can plead guilty and we'll ask the judge to let you off with a 1-year stay at Club Fed, end quote. Even a clearly innocent person, parentheses, let alone a defendant who isn't squeaky clean, end parentheses, would be crazy not to take that deal. And that's the way it shakes out in real life. 98% of federal convictions are obtained through plea bargains. Linked here. On paper, there's a right to trial by jury, but in practice, 98% of convicts, parentheses, including, now Larry Vickers, end parentheses, were extorted into giving up that right. Parentheses. A more famous, non-gun related example is the celebrity college admissions scandal. Lori Loughlin, of Full House fame, initially refused to plead guilty, insisting on her right to a jury trial. Prosecutors then retaliated by filing additional charges against her, linked here, punishable by up to 45 years in prison. Lo and behold, she then, quote, voluntarily, end quote, forfeited her right in exchange for getting just 2 months in prison, linked here, end parentheses. Don't think he meant to put that parentheses here. I continue reading. There's a lot of bravado in the gun community about civil disobedience. We wrote about the value of that in, quote, OSD episode 114, One Size Fits Each, end quote. Linked here. But a case like Vickers illustrates that in this space, the government has much more leverage than you do. It's important to know the law and to know that even when the government's view of the law is wrong, they have a lot of ways to win anyway. And that ends the article. This is one of those, you read it once, you're in disbelief. You read it twice, you're in anger. And you read it 3 times, and you realize that there's a lot of things stacked up against you, and we're supposed to be citizens of a country that gives its citizens a lot of rights. What bothers me so much, and please note that I don't think this is a left or right issue, what bothers me so much is that the law is so vague and there is so little repercussion for the prosecuting attorneys to take that vague law and use it to go ahead to charge people and go up to people before they even charge them and say, hey, look, this is this vague law that we're going to charge you with. And you can either plead not guilty and go to and you technically have the right for a jury trial, but we're going to make your life hellishly difficult leading up to the jury trial. And we're also going to throw the max penalty at you. Or you can simply plead guilty and we'll give you a greatly reduced sentence. No muss, no fuss, and the only thing that really looks bad is the fact that you got technically convicted. Well, even before you technically get convicted, you're pleading guilty. So you technically look bad that way. It is outrageous that the United States government is okay with this, allows this, and allows its government agencies to interpret vague laws any which direction. Laws should be written so that the citizens understand them, and so when citizens do break them, the agencies can go and charge them and say, you violated this law because this law is written in this way, and because you did X, that clearly violates this law as clearly written here. But no, it's, well, we're going to write this vaguely, then write an open letter saying what we really mean. And then, if we want to charge you, we're going to find a way around what we previously explained in our open letters about what we vaguely wrote, so then we can get a charge and a conviction. The government shouldn't be doing this. They should be being held to a higher standard. They need to be held to a higher standard. And it frustrates me that there is no higher standard that can take and hold, in this case, the ATF agency, but it goes for the other agencies too, like the CIA and the FBI. It frustrates me to no end that there is no government agency to take and hold these agencies to account when they try and take and are able to twist vague laws into something resembling an indictment of someone in order to pressure them into pleading guilty. Stop bullying your citizens, America. You should know better, and you should be held to a higher standard. That concludes today's video. Please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, leaving a comment down below, and I will see you in the next one. Not only will I link this Substack article here, I am also going to link the justice.gov, where it has its press release on, excuse me, the press release that the Substack was based off of, as well as the link for the plea agreement that was offered to Larry Vickers. All of that will be linked in the show notes below. Thank you.